Mary? Oh, yeah, now it is. Some preacher once wrote, recently, this pastor was talking, I tried something different in our worship service. Instead of preaching at the end, which is what I'm doing right now, I did it first. So the music, the offering, the scripture reading, and all the other things that we do, we're going to do that afterwards. And this pastor was talking, as I stood behind the pulpit, I could see people getting ready for the offering until they realized I was starting my message. A first grader, oh boy, in the congregation was perplexed. That's why I'm glad when I start my messages, the kids are gone because they can speak their minds. A first grader in the congregation was perplexed by this change of routine, this change of schedule, and whispered frantically to her mom, "Doesn't he know we haven't paid him to talk yet?" Is this the business we are in? You give your tithes and your offerings and expect the pastor to preach. And when you pay your pastor well, you expect the preacher to preach well. If you don't pay him that much, well, you don't expect that much from him. Do we give our offerings so that the pastor will talk? It's like a wind-up toy. Do we give our tithes and our offerings so that the staff are paid with their paychecks? Do we give our tithes and our offerings because we are so blessed to have an AC in this kind of weather, and we need AC? Is this the business we are in as Christians, as members of Vessels of Hope? I give, and I better get something in return. Luke 2, verses 40 to 49 are the verses that I want you to go to right now. You have your Bibles, you have your iPhones and phones, you have your Kindles, whatever you have, your Samsung tablets. If you still don't have any of those, you can always look up to the front and you will see our text. But the best thing to have is a Bible that you can read from. It's always a different experience to be reading the Word of God as it is written in written form, And the child, you guys have that? Luke 2, verses 40 to 49. Luke is in the New Testament, so it's easy to find. Matthew, Mark, Luke, third one. And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, he went up to the feast according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and at his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" Jesus was 12 years old. And I want you to remember, who are when your kids were 12, maybe when you were even 12, and when these kids are going to grow up to be 12. Jesus was 12 years old, but he was strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. But Mary and Joseph decided, as by custom and tradition, that he was old enough to travel with them to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. Many times during my messages and during our Bible study, we probably talked about what happens to the city of Jerusalem when the Passover is going on. You know, we all know that this is a very important and holy day in the Jewish tradition. So not only is the excitement only in Jerusalem, and you can feel that here as well, especially when there's a huge community of Jews, of Jewish people. Their traditions and their customs are showing. And so Mary and Joseph decided that Jesus was old enough to travel with them to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover, but then it was time to leave, because this is not just one of those things that you go in for a couple of hours and then you go home. This goes on for 3 days, for a couple of days. When one full day, so they all decided to go. Once again, they're not caravanning as in your cars, going all at the same time with all your phones and your walkie-talkies and everything. Every time I read this, I always remember things that this church has done from many, many years ago when we've gone to all the way up north to Arroyo Grande, and we would try to caravan that way because it's far away. From the time that we all camped out on the Colorado River in, where is that? Laughlin, Nevada, and because of all the excitement of the buffet, we forgot Fiji and one of the places there, and we did not, it's like that feeling. We went to the buffet, and then we came back to the campsite, and we were not paying attention if all the kids were there. We were not counting, obviously. And so when we got back to the campsite, it took a while for us because we were all doing whatever. And then all of a sudden, one of Fiji's friends, by the way, Fiji, how old were you? Fiji will never forget this. She was only 9. She was younger than Jesus. And so, she was, Fiji always tells us the story if she wants us to feel bad. But, we never noticed, we didn't know that we were missing Fiji until one of our friends, who's part of the church also, came in late, and she came in, and she goes around, she goes, "Where's Fiji?" Of course, you're going to look for your friend when you get there. And we're like, "Where is Fiji?" Oh my gosh. And so we all came together, and we went back to the casino where the buffet was at, and we had people going around the structures. We had walkie-talkies, and we were, I don't know, but during that time, I'm so sure many of us, especially her parents and my mother and my dad was still alive at that point, we were probably shaking their boots because we don't know what was going on. I was just excited because it felt like we were the SWAT, coming down to the casino and looking, because that's not my child, so I don't know how that feels like. But this is the same thing. By the way, if you guys want to know, Fiji was very brave, and she sat by the casino. She didn't go around. She didn't talk to strangers. Well, some strangers wanted to take her into the buffet. Good thing Fiji already ate, so she said she's not hungry, and so she just stayed there, and she stayed there for how many hours again, Fiji? 4 hours. At least you're bored and not scared. That's a good thing. Jesus, they were walking for a whole day, and they didn't know that Jesus was not with them. So, so when one full day has passed, they started, it's like one of those things like, yeah, where is Jesus? And so they started to ask the people walking with them back to Nazareth, have they seen their son? And after 3 days, so they went back to Jerusalem because they cannot find him in the caravan. After they went back to Jerusalem, looked for him for 3 days. And after 3 days, they found Jesus. He was sitting in the temple among the teachers. And they were surprised not to find Jesus there, but exactly what he was doing. And so notice what they found. Jesus was asking, and Jesus was answering questions. Notice what his parents said when they found him in verse 48. "Son, why have you treated us like this?" In Fiji's story, it was Fiji who told us, "People, why did you treat me like this? Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." And then notice Jesus' response in verse 49. "Well, why were you searching for me?" In his very calm and usual way, for a 12-year-old, "Well, why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? Didn't you know that I have to be in my Father's business?" In other translations, it says, "I must be about my Father's business." That statement sums up the secret to a successful Christian life. And when I say successful, I really want to point out that the successful I'm talking about here is the success that you're talking about. A lot of people think, success is in happiness, which is true. success is in joy. But there are people, and there are many people, especially in this society, who says successful is having enough money, isn't it? Successful is having a good job. Successful is having enough to save, enough for your retirement, enough to send home to the Philippines, or everything else that we do. But, a lot of people go, no, that can't be it. But really, deep down inside, that's what you call success, isn't it? And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. That this statement, I must be about my Father's business, sums up the secret to a successful Christian life. And may I say, lucrative. And you might look at me, oh, pastor shouldn't be preaching about that. There's no such thing as lucrative. But successful Christian life where you are provided for. I must be about my Father's business, Jesus said. This is the business Jesus was in. If someone asks him, that's why when the parents ask him, why did you treat us this way? What are you doing? What are you doing? When people ask you, what do you do for a living? This is Jesus' answer. I must be about my Father's business. This is the business Jesus was in. Yet far too many of us are more concerned about our own business. Before we look at ourselves, you can even look at Mary and Joseph. You spent a day looking for him. You wasted 3 days looking for him in Jerusalem. And all you're doing is over there. Why didn't you come with us? Why didn't you come when all the caravan is leaving? You know that we're going to be worried about you. And yet, what do you say to the question, what are you doing? And Jesus said, I must be in my Father's business. Yet far too many of us, including Mary and Joseph, are more concerned about our own business. Sure, we are. If you are Mary and Joseph, you will be concerned about that too. We lost time already. Now everyone had to go, and now we don't have anyone to go with. We are more concerned about our own business than we are with God's. We make time for all the things we want to do. Oh, you guys listen to this one. We make time for all the things we want to do. Sometimes I look at the time when when I used to teach at school. And I have to be at school a little bit before 8 because, as teachers, you gotta prepare your classroom and do all that. Although when you're teaching adults, you don't really have to prepare that much. So you're doing all that. And yet when I have to be at church, and yet when I have to be at prayer meeting, yet when I have to be in Sunday school, I'm not going to be that concerned with time. It's all right. I'll make it there. Or if you're going to church, it's okay. There's just singing in the beginning. And someone actually even said, community singing, it's just a time where we all sing together, and that's it. We make time for all the things we want to do and squeeze God in here and there. Why? Because we really are all about our own business. This society teaches us to look after ourselves first, and it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or you've been one for years. Somehow, this is the lifestyle we settle with. I'm going to say that again. This society teaches us, and we cannot say, well, I don't count myself in society. Of course we do. We do this all the time. This society teaches us, and we have learned it, that we need to look after ourselves first. And as I said, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or you've been a Christian for years. Somehow, this is the lifestyle we settle with, especially here in the United States, especially in Southern California. We're on time when we go to work. We will outspend everyone to get the car we want, the shoes we want, the condo we want. We will be in business to sustain the lifestyle we want. But in Jesus' case, that statement was a lifestyle, not just a cute little phrase. I am about my Father's business. Jesus shows us, even at the age of 12, that being about his Father's business produces changes in our lives. It produced a change. I'm sure it did in the life of Mary and Joseph. It produced a change in his life. At the age of 12, can you imagine that? The first thing that happens when we start minding or looking into our Father's business, or we're about our Father's business, is that our priorities will change. Going to Jerusalem for Passover is a big thing. Of course, Jerusalem As I said a while ago, I've had many a message that talks about Passover and how holy that day is and what happens in the city of Jerusalem, the town of Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem looks so much different now, but the vibes are the same. Can I say that? And especially if you come with us in 2017 to go back to Israel and visit Jerusalem, we get to see how exciting Jerusalem is for a 12-year-old. But imagine yourself as a 12-year-old going on a trip with all the neighborhood kids, yet it wasn't important anymore for Jesus to see the circus. It's not important for Jesus to go to the souk or the bazaar or the street market. He went to the temple. That was his priority as a 12-year-old in his father's business. I bet you dollars to donuts his friends were not thinking at all of the temple. And when we begin to be, so the key is this, when we begin to be about our Father's business, our priorities will change even at a young age. Don't think, my priorities will change when I get a job. Our priorities start now. It starts now. It doesn't matter if you have a job. It doesn't matter how young you are. Our priorities start now. And when we begin to be about our Father's business, our priorities will change. Jesus also showed that being about God's business changed his schedule. Schedule. Okay, never mind priorities. Maybe that's something so big, but we can talk about schedule because we all have a schedule. Especially here in the United States, we are all always running around, always doing things. We have a schedule, there's a plan, especially if you have kids. Got to do this at this point, got to do that at this point. You miss it. Oh my goodness, where am I going to find the time to do that? Change his schedule. That was what happens to Jesus when he's about God's business. And not that just happened to Jesus, but that is what happens to us when we are about our God's business. Joseph and Mary had a definite schedule for leaving Jerusalem and coming back home. But Jesus could not keep their schedule, for he was doing his Father's schedule. In John 4:4, Jesus said, there was a time that Jesus said, I need to go through Samaria. Why? Because he had nothing better to do? Why? Because it's a scenic route going through Samaria? No, Samaria happens to be very, very hostile towards Jesus and the Jews. No, because his Father said go, and he was about his Father's business. His internal GPS and calendar was set on this business and on this schedule. Finally, Jesus demonstrates that when we are about God's business, God will mind your business. I always say that this is one of the things that I made up. Many times pastors just kind of copy from each other. They kind of go, that's a good one. So, you start writing a sermon on that. The Lord speaks to you and says, oh, that's great. And then you see an illustration. Oh, that's a good one. Books upon books are being written. Things upon things online. You can do that. But can I say that this is actually an original, Pastor Jay? Jesus demonstrates that when we are about God's business, God will mind your business. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the best thing that will ever happen to you. When you mind God's business, God will mind yours. What do I mean by that? Jesus was a 12-year-old left behind in Jerusalem. It was estimated that in Jesus' time, the normal population of 40,000 triples to 120,000 to 150,000 during Passover. And many, many things could have happened to Jesus. That casino over there in Laughlin, many, many things could have happened to Fiji. Many, many things could have happened to Jesus. Many, many things could have happened to his parents. And yet they were kept safe. And yet Jesus was kept safe. And I do believe that when we mind our own business, the Lord will keep us in the palm of his hand. Did you hear that? When we mind our own business, the Lord will keep us in the palm of his hand. When we do not forget to give back to him what is due him, whether it be time, whether it be our resources, whether it be our skills, whether it be our talent, whether it be our schedule, he will provide for what it is that will be missing. He'll provide for what it is that we may be losing. I once read the remarks of two people, I was reading this, who decided to trust God with the tithe. Okay, whenever the pastor mentions tithe, some of our ears start closing. Mine is too big, it doesn't close that much, but our ears start closing. We go, I don't want to hear about that. I remember my father when he was pastoring the church. I can see. He speaks about tithing, but I also can see sometimes the struggle. the struggle in preaching about tithing, because as soon as you mention the word tithe, people get, ooh, it's like it's hot. It's hot topic. And, and we start thinking about something else. I'm not listening. But I decide, I once read the remarks of two people. Give me 5 minutes to trust God with a tithe. One man remarked, I heard about tithing, but we decided we could not afford it. By the way, before we go into tithing, let tithe. Some people might not understand. What in the world is a tithe? Why is Pastor Jay saying that that's a taboo word? A tithe is taking 10%. And with all courage, I'm going to say this. A tithe is taking 10% of what you make, 10% of what comes to you. Okay, and I'm going to stop there. And then most of you already know what that means. So I'm reading the remarks of these two people who decided to tithe, and one of them said, I heard about tithing, I learned about tithing, Pastor taught about tithing, Pastor preached about tithing, I learned it in stewardship class, I learned about it in stewardship training, but my wife and I decided we could not afford it. Then as time went on, our troubles grew, this guy said. We talked it over, prayed about it, and decided to try it this time. Now, a couple of years later, we agree it was the best thing we did. We are out of our problems and glad we began tithing. So those are the remarks of these two people, husband and wife. God seemed to bless and prosper us. Quote. That's the end of the quote. I'm going to say again what he said. Then as time went on, our troubles grew. We talked it over, prayed about it, and decided to try it. Now, a couple of years later, we agree it was the best thing we did. We are out of our problems, and we are glad we began tithing. God seemed to bless and prosper us. Now, some of you might say, well, that's not true for everyone. Another said he was glad he had decided to tithe. No thinking of withholding that from the Lord, but the very first time he learned about it, he did it. God seemed to honor my 9/10 more than the 10/10 not tithe. Let's be honest, money is a big test for us. Well, let's be honest, church. Money is a big test for us. This church can ask, you might say, this church can ask me to give my time. This church can ask me to give up my spare time, and I'll gladly give off my spare time to help in various projects. The church can ask me to share my talents, and I'll gladly sing or teach or whatever it is that needs to be done. But let the church make demands on my money. Now we're getting personal here. The message for us today is very simple, church. I don't need to spend 2-3 more pages of typewritten sermon to explain. Let's ask ourselves whose business are we minding today? Are we minding ours or are we minding God's? Remember, this society teaches us to look after ourselves first. Microsoft says to you, where do you want to go to today? UPS tells Jordan, what can Brown do for you? Visa says it's everything where you want to be. Innocent slogans? Are they just a bunch of words that huge advertising companies cleverly think of? I remember in college, I majored in communication, and I soon learned in the first class that there is a message in everything. Even nothingness sends us a message. I learned that nothing said over the TV and magazines, and during that time there was no internet yet, and the radio is ever an innocent slogan. There is always a push for you to do something, and these slogans are asking you to look after yourself. Mind your own business. Prioritize your desire, and nothing else matters but your happiness. Earn your money. Have lots of savings. Do what makes you happy. Earn your money. Spend on anything you like. Life is too short. No matter what needs you see around you, that doesn't matter. Take care of your needs. Take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. Take care of yourself. Who cares what happens to everyone else? And here is a personal testimony. And my testimony is hardly, by the way, exclusive to me. Meaning, many of you have exact same testimony. When I get stingy towards the Lord, what is stingy in Tagalog? Maramot. When I think maramot is better than kuripot. Kuripot is for Ilocanos or something, right? There's something like that. When I get stingy towards the Lord, when I become maramot towards the Lord, when I cut short my tithe, and for those who, hopefully you don't remember that, you forget that. When I cut short my tithe, which is 10% of whatever I receive, I become selfish. I become worried. I even become resentful. And I'm telling you the truth. And here's the biggest thing. I never have enough. Let me say that again. When I cut short my tithe, I never have enough. I'm thinking if I cut short my tithe, I will have enough for everything else. But it's the other way around. When I cut short my tithe, I never have enough. Has that ever happened to you? And I know people are nodding. Some of you, that has ever happened. I get my paycheck, and the first thing I do is pay my bills, because that's important. I pay my bills and hope that I have enough to give to the Lord. You know, that's not until Sunday. Let me take care of these things first, and then, you know, whatever is left, I'm going to give to the Lord. And what happens? I never have enough. I challenge you to do it the other way around. And some of you have taken that challenge already. And try to give to Him first. And see what happens. See what happens. When that paycheck comes, and you whip out your paycheck, or you go to your computer and start paying bills, the first thing you do is take away whatever it is that you want to give to the Lord. Whatever it is that the Lord has required you to give to Him. And I want you to try that. That's what you call being about our Father's business. Give first to Him, regardless of how tough it is. And He makes sure that you will get through. Give first to Him, and regardless how tough it is, He makes sure that you will get through. When we mind God's business, oh, how He will mind yours. And the Bible guarantees it. Let us pray.